We are in Lesson 5, I think about page 21 in the book. We were looking at this image of Daniel, or image that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed in Daniel 2. In Daniel, the 7th chapter, there's a parallel to it, but it was a dream by Belshazzar at that point in time. But it's basically the same dream, just different figures. But Daniel prophesies that in the days of the kings of the Roman Empire, that the God of heaven would set up a kingdom. It says that it shall destroy all the kingdoms which were envisioned by Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. And as we've noted before in our classes, those kingdoms were the Babylonian, that's the head of gold, or that figure in Belshazzar's lion that had wings, eagle's wings, that's the way he puts it. Then the Medo-Persian Empire, which would conquer the Babylonian Empire, was the breast and arms of silver. And in Belshazzar's, it was an image likened to a bear. Then the third kingdom that he prophesies of, the Grecian Empire, conquered the Medo-Persian, even as the Medo-Persians conquered the Babylonians. In Belshazzar's, it was likened to a lion, or excuse me, a leopard, which had 4 wings on its back. So, quite odd type of image or images in Belshazzar's. And finally, Rome would conquer the Alexander the Great's kingdom, the Grecian kingdom. And it says in Daniel 2 and verse 40 that the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things. And as iron that breaketh all things, it shall break in pieces and bruise. That's that legs of iron and feet with iron partly clay. Or in Belshazzar's, the fourth beast was, it's described as dreadful and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. It had 10 horns. So that's dealing with that Roman Empire that would destroy all of the others. But out of these kingdoms, that kingdom of God would be established. A mountain or a stone cut out of the mountain would go down and strike this image of Nebuchadnezzar and would destroy it. Our book puts it that there exists basically 2 theories concerning the time of the establishment of this final kingdom, which is spoken of as the one that was created by or cut out of the mountain and thus God. I don't think I have this turned on. It helps to turn on your equipment, doesn't it? again to get it to connect there. There's two basic premises as far as this kingdom. One of them that, let's see, well, see if I can enlarge that just a little bit. There. And I went too far. One holds that the kingdom has been established, that God, or that Christ now reigns over it, governs it, which is the position that we would hold. The other idea that is presented is that the kingdom is not yet established. That it will not be established till that millennial age of 1,000-year reign by Christ, that's going to establish the Lord's kingdom. In what you see before you on the screen, I wish I had been able to get a little bit better, but I didn't devise it. It's something that I grabbed off of the internet. There's 4 millennial views. A lot of times we talk about premillennialism as if that's really the only view. The view of the majority of people today is that top one called dispensational premillennialism. That we are today in the, as they would put it, the church age. Then there's going to be a rapture, and we'll get to this in a minute and I'll come back to that. And then the second coming, and at that second coming there would be the establishment of that kingdom. And there you have the millennial kingdom of 1,000 years. And then after that 1,000 years we would go into that eternal state. Most of them, I believe, hold that this earth will be renovated, renovated earth that we will reside on. That's dispensational premillennialism. It really started in the latter part of the 1800s. And it was popularized first by the Schofield Bible. That became a very popular study Bible. But it taught this dispensational premillennial view. Then the late great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey just sent it over the edge in a sense as to people's belief in it, so that it's the common view that's held today among those who claim to be of Christ. A second view is historic premillennialism. And when you talk about historic premillennialism, you can trace this all the way back to the 2nd century. So people as far back as the 2nd century were advocating this historic premillennialism. In this, you have, again, the church age, which we would be in now. Then you would have a rapture. taking place. And in that rapture, then, the coming of Christ as well, to set up the millennial kingdom. And thus the kingdom is established at that second coming for 1,000 years, and then again that eternal state after that. The third view is post-millennialism. If you read very much of Alexander Campbell's work, you will find that he was a post-millennialist. He published a paper for I don't know how many years there are of it, called The Millennial Kingdom, in which he was advocating that there's going to come a millennial kingdom. But in this view, you have the church age starting out, but over time there's going to be a great conversion of people to Christianity, which will then usher in the millennial kingdom. So there's no real definitive time, and of course those who were post-millennialist, they will come up with all of these ideas in which they are setting forth that the millennial kingdom is near. Of course, Campbell was thinking the same thing back then. The problem that they continually have, and maybe part of the reason why it's lost favor, is that things seem to get worse, don't they? From a moral and religious standpoint, would you say the 1800s were better or worse than now? They were better? Well, that's the opposite of postmillennialism. It's supposed to get better. And a growing religious aspect of the world which would usher in that millennial kingdom. So, just from observation, there's a lot of difficulties with this post-millennial theory. The fourth view is amillennialism. When you see a with something like unto this, it's called an alpha privative or something along that line, which basically is saying no. And so you have the no millennial. That's not really true. It's been given that name, but that's not a true depiction of what the view holds. Because they do believe in a millennial aspect of the kingdom. But they believe that it started with Christ's ascension into heaven and continues on until the second coming. Some of them would say the second coming is that where the saints are raptured into the air and then enter into that eternal state. Because they believe that, as the others would put it, the church age is equivalent to that millennial kingdom, and there's no 1,000-year reign of Christ here upon this earth. Thus, they've been assigned that idea of amillennialism. The first three are obviously wrong. The fourth one, amillennialism, is, if I had to classify myself as one of these, that's what I would classify myself as. I think it is basically correct. Several years back, maybe I should say a few decades ago, just a couple of years to some of us, isn't it? Tom Warren was editing The Spiritual Sword, and he published 2 issues dealing with premillennialism, more the dispensational premillennial view. But he dealt with all 4 of these views. Brother J. Noel Meredith dealt with the amillennial view. And as he did, and as I read his review, and I read it again recently, it was, I think his name is Hokema, was what the amillennial view that he was reviewing. And the only difference that I could determine that from what Brother Meredith, and thus I would assume Brother Warren would say, and this other individual, was the view of Revelation, the 20th chapter. And the amillennialist position in Revelation 20 was that the first resurrection is dealing with baptism, where one is raised to walk in newness of life. Thus, the first resurrection. The second resurrection that he's talking about would be to that eternal state. I ended up saying, well, that's basically my view of Revelation 20. Brother Meredith, and as I say, I'm assuming Brother Warren, since he's the one who published it, but that's not necessarily parallel all the time on things like that, but he was saying that it is not a spiritual resurrection of baptism, it's the resurrection of an idea. I remember many years ago, as I was directing the lectureship, I assigned Brother Clifford Newell to deal with Revelation 20. And he and I talked about it, and at the time that I assigned it to him, he basically agreed with my view. At least I thought so. When he sent me his manuscript, he was advocating the same thing that J. Noel Meredith was advocating, that it is the resurrection of an idea. Now, I have no big problem with that, but I just don't think it's the right interpretation of Revelation 20. Now, what difference would it make? Well, it seemingly to Brother J. Noel Meredith, it made a lot of difference, because they were basically saying that that is a false view. But other than that one, how we interpret Revelation 20 was really the only difference that Brother Meredith brought out. So, as I say, I would classify myself basically as an amillennialist. Now then, could there be some differences between individuals as far as amillennialism? Sure. Even as there is in all of these others. But then I wanted also to go back to this dispensational premillennialism for a minute. This one graphic here shows the church age, and then a rapture, then a 7-year tribulation, then the second coming, and then the establishment of the kingdom. Actually, that is referred to as, let me see if I can enlarge that real quick a little bit. As a pre-tribulation rapture view. That is, that there's the rapture of the church before that 7 years of tribulation, in which there's supposed to be, this world is supposed to just be a horrible, horrible place in which to live. But the church has been raptured away into heaven. Then after that 7 years of tribulation, Jesus will come with the church, and that's when he sets up that millennial kingdom. Well, that is the pre-tribulation, or before the tribulation rapture. The rapture takes place before that period of tribulation. That's one view of dispensational premillennialist. A second view is the mid-tribulation rapture. That is, you have the church age now, and then you're going to have that 7 year tribulation, except it's going to be broken up in half. The first 3.5 years, while they're going to be bad, it's going to be bad. It's not going to be bad as the last 3.5 years. And in the middle of that, at the 3.5 year period, Christ will then return to rapture the church into the air, so that the church avoids that really bad part of the tribulation. Now, they're going to suffer some in that first 3.5 years, but the last 3.5 years are the really bad part. Then after that second 3.5 years takes place, Jesus comes with his church, and then you have him establishing that 1,000-year reign here upon this earth. After that, then the last judgment, and again eternity. By the way, and this is kind of with all three of these views, when he comes that second time with the church, that's when that great battle of Armageddon takes place, in which everyone in the world is in this very small valley of Hinnon. That will be a miracle all by itself. Well, no, all of the people being in that valley, there's too many people for that. But that's going to be the Battle of Armageddon at that time. Yes, they would be. Because their bodies then would be raised when Jesus comes back to establish that kingdom. The third view of the rapture deals with, it's called the post-tribulation rapture theory. And you're going to have that 7 year tribulation, just like the others do. And then the rapture of the church to meet Jesus in the air, and that second coming with the church then at the same time, basically. And Jesus establishes that 1,000-year reign here upon this earth. And again, you have the Battle of Armageddon at that time, and then you have this 1,000-year reign of Christ. Then judgment and eternity. So within the dispensational premillennialist, you have all three of these views. So in a sense, if you're dealing with a premillennialist, you have to first determine if he's really a premillennialist, if he's postmillennialist, if he's non-millennialist, or a historic premillennialist. As I say, just about everyone nowadays is a dispensational premillennialist. There are some who still hold to the historic millennialism and the others, but just about everyone is dispensationalist. And that's why generally in preaching and in teaching, you will find very few people as teachers will use that term dispensational premillennialist. It's too hard and too long. And teachers are generally lazy. I didn't say that. We shorten it to premillennialism because that's basically what everyone is, a dispensationalist. I've tried in my teaching and in the latter years to, instead of saying premillennialism, say dispensationalist, to make the distinction, or try to, between these four views. But when you're dealing with that, you also have to find out, are they pre, mid, or post-tribulation rapture?
And do they know?
And that would be a good point. Do they even know? Let me add this, that in dealing with dispensationalists, you're not dealing with a doctrine. We tend to try to approach it that way, but you're not dealing with a specific doctrine. You're dealing with an entire philosophy of the Bible, an understanding of the Bible. It is, and so you can't just pick out, here's a doctrine. You know, we can talk about faith only. Okay, we understand that, we understand the doctrine, and we understand how to deal with the doctrine. But if you're talking about dispensationalism, it is an entire system as to an understanding, how you understand the Bible. It's not any one specific doctrine. And that makes it difficult to deal with these individuals if they actually know what they're talking about. Let me also mention, just go back, that's went too far. With those who are historic and post-millennialist, generally they will hold that Christ established, at least in some sense, the kingdom when he ascended into heaven. And so you can't just say, now the dispensationalist doesn't. He rejects that idea. But if historic and postmillennialist, they will admit that Christ did go into heaven, and in some sense the kingdom was established and people were a part of that kingdom. I've had preachers, and I've said it myself probably in years past, that if you can prove that the church and the kingdom are one and the same, you can destroy premillennialism. Well, you can, as if you're talking about dispensational premillennialism. But the historic and the postmillennialist would basically agree with you. So, need to have that understanding, but dispensationalist, it's an entire system of how you understand the Bible. They are generally very this world oriented. They are materialistic in their nature. Let me add this as well, because we've dealt with in years past the 80-70 doctrine. We had the debate here with Hogler and Neubauer and Daniel Denham debating him. The way in which you would deal with a dispensational premillennialist, the same arguments that you would use in relationship to them, you would use in relationship to the 80-70 doctrine. They don't believe the same thing, but the arguments are basically the same. They likewise are very this world oriented. But both are materialistic system of belief. So going back to what the book has, after this sideline, this lesson is going to deal with that position, thus that shows that the church and the kingdom are one and the same. That what you see in relationship to the kingdom, you see in relationship to the church. And Christ is the head of that church, the kingdom, and the church is in truth that kingdom of God. And our book goes on to then say, therefore, under the heading of the church, we shall endeavor to observe the evidence which bears record of its divine position as the kingdom of God. We shall strive to answer in the positive the question, has the kingdom come? And the answer is yes, it has. But that's what we're going to be showing in these lessons. And he adds, it's my sincere hope that a greater understanding of the position of the church in relationship to the kingdom, as well as a greater faith for the divine cause and goals upon which the church is predicated, may be attained by everyone. Okay, let's, that next section. The testimony of the prophets. Now then, I probably should have stayed at that graphic that we had. Because in Daniel, the 7th chapter, in fact, let me go over to it just a second. Wrong graphic. In Daniel, the 7th chapter, this is Belteshazzar's dream. And the four world empires that are established. In verse 13 and verse 14 of that chapter, I'm going to skip down to those verses because that's what we want to center on. He says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days. And they brought him near before him, and there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. Think back to the 2nd chapter. And as we read in verse 44 in particular, that in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom. What's Daniel 7, 13, and 14 setting forth? A kingdom. Because it was given to him dominion, glory, and a kingdom that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. Well, the God of heaven shall set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God of heaven, or the great God, hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. The dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. So Daniel 2 is saying forth, here's a kingdom that God is going to set up. It's going to be that which he cut out of the mountain, and it strikes that image in the feet, and it fills the earth. In Daniel 7, here's this kingdom that's given to him, along with dominion, glory, that all people, nations, and languages should serve. Dominion is an everlasting dominion. What is it? A kingdom which shall never be destroyed. Daniel 2:44. It shall not pass away, and his kingdom shall not be destroyed. But now then, look at Acts, the first chapter. And in Acts 1, we have the situation where Jesus has appeared to his apostles in the first part of chapter 1, and he gave them the Great Commission, told them that they would be baptized, the apostles would be baptized, the Holy Spirit, as was prophesied by John, and they would be his witnesses in all the earth, beginning at Jerusalem, then Judea and Samaria, and unto the uttermost part of the earth. Verse 8. Verse 9 says, and when he had spoken these things, while they beheld, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. Now notice that. A cloud received him out of the sight. Notice back in Daniel, the 7th chapter. I beheld one like the Son of Man, came with the clouds of heaven. Well, here we have in Acts 1 and verse 9, here's Christ taken up, and a cloud received him out of sight. And when they looked steadfastly toward heaven, who was that? That's the apostles were there looking up into heaven. As he went up, behold, 2 men by them in white apparel, which also said, Ye men of Galilee, why stand ye gazing into heaven? This same Jesus, which is taken up into heaven, shall so come in like manner as ye have seen him go into heaven. Now notice that. He is going into heaven. Notice the chart that's in the book. In Daniel 7, 13, and 14, you have the Son of Man, one likened to the Son of Man. He is going to. Notice that word to, because it's an important word. He's going to the Ancient of Days. The Ancient of Days is God. He's going to the Ancient of Days in the clouds. Now then, in Acts, the first chapter, you have Christ ascending to heaven, where God is, in the clouds. What Daniel prophesied in Daniel 7 is being fulfilled in Acts, the first chapter, verses 9 through 11. But the specific thing that you need to notice, Daniel 7, again, and verse 13, that he came to the Ancient of Days. Now, if you look at those ideas of dispensationalist, when is Christ supposed to set up that kingdom according to dispensationalism? When he comes to the Father, or when he comes from the Father? They have it when Christ leaves heaven and comes back to this earth. They have him coming back and setting foot on this earth. That's when that millennial kingdom, or the kingdom, is going to be established. They have Daniel having to say that he saw one coming from the Ancient of Days. That's not what he says. It says when he went to the Ancient of Days. That's when he received the kingdom. When did Christ go to heaven? When he ascended into heaven. And that's when the kingdom was given to him. It is an exact parallel between Daniel, the 7th chapter, and Acts, the 2nd chapter, or 1st chapter. Here's Christ going to God, and when he goes to God, going in the clouds, he would receive the kingdom. Thus, well, because Andrew's about to ring the second bell, we won't continue on in what the book has, but and we'll plan on starting there next time. But this destroys the idea of dispensationalism, because they have him receiving that kingdom when he leaves heaven and comes back to this earth. What Daniel prophesied is he receives the kingdom when he goes into heaven or to the Father, not when he returns from the Father. Any questions or comments since Andrew's rung the second bell?
Where's the handout?
What handout? You don't get handouts here. How dare you think of something?